The morning sun spilled over the rooftops, casting long shadows across the patchwork quilt of lawns in our suburban neighborhood. Each house stood like a soldier in neat formation, their chimneys puffing the last wisps of dawn's chill. Everything was still, as if the world held its breath before the day unfurled its routine. I cherished these quiet moments. They felt like a soft buffer before the ordinary chaos of daily life came knocking. My garden, lovingly tended, was a sanctuary of color and fragrance. It was where I found solace, digging fingers into the earth, coaxing life from seeds. But peace is a fragile thing, easily disturbed by the slightest ripple. My neighbor, Karen, was often that ripple. She was the kind of person who mistook power for strength, her voice a weapon wielded with precision during the monthly homeowners association meetings. Her existence was a symphony of complaints, a cacophony of demands dressed in pastel cardigans and pearl necklaces. It began with a letter, slid surreptitiously under my door, a formal complaint about my dog, Max. His evening barks apparently were a disruption to the sanctity of our block. In truth, Max was a gentle soul, his barks merely a part of his canine conversation with the world. He barked at the squirrels that dared to trespass, at the birds that sang too loudly, at life itself, in joyful recognition. I allowed myself a small smile as I read the letter, imagining Karen hunched over her pristine dining table, pen scratching angrily against paper. It was her usual form, official, yet impersonal. Her words, though crafted to sting, only brushed against my resolve, like a mild breeze. This was not the first time, nor would it be the last, that Karen found something in our lives to critique. The next-door neighbor's fence was too high, the mulberry tree dropped too many berries. The children playing tag were a disturbance. In Karen's world, there was no room for imperfection, no tolerance for the spontaneous beauty of life. Her obsession with order was a fortress, isolating her from the vibrant unpredictability that existed just beyond her thresholds. I could have responded with equal pettiness, firing off a letter laced with passive-aggressive undertones or rallying the neighborhood against her. But that was not my way. Instead, I chose to weave calm into my response, to counter her discord with harmony. The world needed more quiet strength, I believed, and less noise. So, I took Max for a long walk, letting him run through the fields until his joy was spent, and his barks quieted to a contented pant. I planted lavender along the borders of my garden, knowing its scent would waft across to Karen's yard, mingling with the perfume of her meticulously arranged roses. I let the moments pass, allowed the days to stitch themselves into a tapestry of serene acceptance. Karen's complaint might have been a pebble cast into our tranquil pond, causing ripples to spread, but I was the water, absorbing each wave until stillness returned. For now, I would let her believe she had won this round. But life has a way of balancing the scales. There would be a time, a moment, when I would let my own quiet rebellion take form. Until then, I nurtured my garden, whispered to Max that all was well, and watched the sun arch its way across the sky, promising new days and untold stories. The sun hung at its apex, a glaring eye surveying the neighborhood with the indifference of a seasoned observer. I sat on my porch, a modest oasis of calm amid the escalating chaos. The air carried a heat that seemed to intensify the tension weaving through the cul-de-sac. It was the kind of day where the smallest inconvenience could ignite tempers like dry brush meeting a spark. Karen's reaction to my sonic retaliation played out exactly as expected. Her tightly wound composure unraveled, revealing a frantic energy that propelled her into action. The first volley had been fired, and she was determined to strike back with the precision of a practiced archer. Her campaign began subtly, the whisper of absurdity tucked neatly into the minutes of the next HOA meeting. A proposal to regulate lawn ornament colors, thinly veiled as an attempt to maintain neighborhood aesthetics. A sudden interest in the decibel levels permissible from backyard gatherings, thinly veiled as a concern for community peace. She cloaked her vendetta in the guise of decorum, her true intentions detectable only to those who knew her battle tactics. The rules tightened, like a noose. Citations appeared on doorsteps like unsolicited, spiteful gifts. A leaf left too long on a driveway, a flower that dared to bloom beyond its allotted space. I became an unwitting star in her crusade, my dog's supposed transgressions documented with the diligence of a historian recording a pivotal war. Gossip spread like unchecked wildfire. The neighborhood grapevine, usually a gentle murmur of mundane updates, transformed into a cacophony of speculation and judgment. I could feel the eyes of the street upon me, some sympathetic, others complicit in Karen's machinations. It was a performance, and I was both actor and audience, enmeshed in a drama that unfolded with a predictability that was almost comforting. Yet, underneath her veneer of control, I sensed Karen's desperation, an unraveling thread in her tapestry of authority. Each new rule, each citation, was a stitch in her failing attempt to bind the neighborhood to her will. Her fear of losing that control was palpable, a faint tremor beneath her outward confidence. There was an irony in her battle tactics. For all her attempts to silence, to control, she had amplified her presence, her rants a daily feature of our midday soundscape. Noon became a ritual, a time when fences ceased to be barriers and became the front row of an absurd theater. I could have stopped. I could have let her have her victory, retreating into the quiet that she craved. But there was something satisfying in watching her unravel, in seeing the cracks widen in her carefully constructed facade. Her own voice, a mocking echo of her authority, became my protest, my silent refusal to be cowed by rules unjustly wielded. And so, the days marched on, each one a chapter in our escalating Cold War. The neighborhood seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next move in a game none of us had agreed to play. I watched Karen from my porch, her shadow slipping past windows and across lawns like a specter haunting her own domain. In the pause before the storm, I found a strange peace. There was strength in my defiance, in the quiet roar of my resistance. As I sat there, the sun dipping lower, painting the street in hues of gold, I wondered how long this dance would last. But for now, my dog sprawled contentedly at my feet. I was content to let the music play on. At noon, like clockwork, Karen's voice erupted across the neighborhood. Her shrill complaints and hyperbolic slanders echoed from the speakers, a ghostly chorus that stirred the stillness of midday. I sat on my porch, savoring the irony like a well-aged wine. They had said my dog was too loud, that his joyful barks disturbed the tranquility they so dearly cherished. Yet, here was Karen, an unending symphony of discontent, playing her greatest hits for all to hear. The sun beat down with a relentless fervor, casting distorted shadows that danced across my lawn. The air was thick with a sense of anticipation, a brewing storm of tension that hung heavily between the houses. I could feel them, my neighbors, peering through their curtains, faces pressed against glass like spectators at a show. The neighborhood had become a theater, the street our stage, and Karen's vocalizations the unwitting performance. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves, a whisper among the chaos as I took a sip from my lemonade. The tartness mirrored the satisfaction that curled at the edges of my lips. Tension simmered beneath the surface, palpable as the humidity that clung to the air. This was not just about a dog or a woman's grievances. It was about power, control, and the exquisite delight of giving someone a taste of their own medicine. The murmurs of discontent began to ripple through the neighborhood. I could see a group of neighbors gathering at the edge of the cul-de-sac, drawn together by shared annoyance or perhaps a collective itch to confront the situation. I watched them, my heart a steady drumbeat in my chest. As they gestured and nodded, a silent council convened under the glaring sun. Karen's voice continued unabated, each word a stone cast into the pond of our community's delicate peace. I leaned back in my chair, letting the moment stretch out, savoring the irony that dripped from each syllable. My dog lay beside me, basking in the sun, oblivious to the human drama playing out around him. He was the unwitting catalyst of this quiet revolution, a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts can ignite the greatest changes. I could feel the shift, subtle but undeniable, as the whispers grew louder. There was a beauty in the chaos, a poetic justice in the cacophony. Karen, blinded by her own self-righteousness, hadn't foreseen this. She had wielded her influence like a weapon, and now the recoil was upon her. The group at the cul-de-sac began to dissolve, their consensus reached. They moved with a purposeful stride, their target clear. The sun cast their elongated shadows forward, a band of vigilantes marching toward justice. I watched them approach Karen's house, a silent witness to the unfolding drama. I felt a twinge of something. Not quite guilt, not quite satisfaction. A realization, perhaps, that in this battle of wills, we were all just players on a stage, each with our roles to play. The irony was bittersweet, much like life itself. The confrontation was inevitable, a crescendo that had been building all this time, and as Karen's voice finally faltered, replaced by the angry buzz of conversation, I realized that sometimes the most powerful statement is made not with words, but with the echoing silence that follows. Silence settled over the neighborhood like a weary truce. The echoes of Karen's rants had filled the air for weeks, a symphony of chaos that crescendoed daily at noon. Her words, once biting and potent, had become hollow, like a broken bell, tolling without purpose. The community, once vibrant and alive, now moved with a cautious reverence, as if afraid their very footsteps might trigger another episode. I watched from my porch as neighbors emerged tentatively, like animals testing the air after a storm. The sky was a brilliant blue, the kind that promised hope and renewal. The sun warmed the pavement, and the world seemed to exhale for the first time in days. My dog lay beside me, serene and silent, a testament to the absurdity of the initial complaint. His presence was a balm, soothing the edges of my frustration. His loyalty reminded me that some battles were worth fighting, even when the enemy was shrouded in layers of self-righteousness and misguided authority. Karen had retreated. Her fortress of rules and regulations had crumbled under the weight of her own words, played back to her in a relentless loop of irony. She had underestimated the power of a community united by shared annoyance and a desire for peace. Her reign had ended not with a bang, but with the quiet realization that she had become a caricature of her own making. I had expected resistance, maybe even retaliation. Instead, there was an eerie calmness to her absence. Her curtains remained drawn, her porch barren. It was as if she had vanished, leaving behind only the echoes of her discontent. The neighborhood, once held captive by her whims, was beginning to rediscover its rhythm. The first tentative signs of life returned slowly. Children's laughter skipped across lawns, breaking the silence with their innocent joy. Birds filled the trees with their songs, weaving melodies that danced on the breeze. The clatter of bicycles, the murmur of neighbors exchanging pleasantries. All of it stitched the fabric of community back together, thread by delicate thread. In the newfound quiet, I reflected on the power of persistence. Karen's downfall was not orchestrated through grand gestures or aggressive confrontation, but through the simple act of letting her own words speak for themselves. It was a subtle rebellion, a gentle reminder that power, wielded without empathy, ultimately collapses under its own weight. A single line of dialogue cuts through my thoughts, a solitary voice from a passing neighbor. We never knew silence could sound so sweet. It hung in the air, a testament to the relief that had washed over us all. It was true. The absence of her diatribes was a melody all its own. Despite the peace, a thread of tension lingered, a whisper of what once was. Karen's presence, though physically diminished, was etched into the collective memory of our street. But it was a memory softened by the realization that we had survived, that we had stood our ground with quiet dignity and emerged stronger for it. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the world in hues of gold and crimson, I felt a sense of closure. Karen's story, though dramatic and invasive, had ultimately become a catalyst for unity. We were no longer just neighbors coexisting. We were a community bound by resilience and silent strength. In the end, the victory was not in silencing Karen, but in reclaiming the peace that had been obscured by her noise. And as I sat there with the soft, snoozing weight of my dog against my leg, I realized that sometimes the most powerful act of defiance is simply refusing to be silenced.